Hey traders, Raghee here, and in this recap video, I'm going to cover the power of narrative. You know, one of the questions I get pretty often is, Raghee, how do you consume all this information? How do you consume the information about ETFs and stocks and futures and currencies and central banks and all the rest? Well, look, you don't have to do it. You know, part of my job here, you know, in the chat room and doing these premium videos is to make you aware of certain narratives. That's my job. And also, I think, to me, it's the most interesting thing out there. I don't want to eye-guzzle whatever's on Netflix, House of Cards, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad. I've never seen a single episode of any of those programs. That's not to say they're not great and that it's not, you know, time well spent. If it's something that makes you happy, cool, right? But I want to know what's going on with the markets. I'll have Bloomberg up. I'll be watching and listening to podcasts. I'll be reading and consuming this stuff because this is my Game of Thrones. So that's number one. Number two, how do you shortcut that? You know, okay, Rog, we get, you know, you don't have a hobby. This is your thing. Fair enough, right? Here's how you shortcut the macro, and I'm going to show you how that made a big difference this morning and how we got long in the equities markets. Okay, so first of all, Google News is really powerful. And if I want to know what the narrative is about anything, I'm just going to go ahead and search it. But I don't do a web search, I do a news search. And what you'll find when you scroll through this is what the sentiment, what a consistent keyword, what a consistent theme is. Whether it's bullish or bearish, what the market's keying off on to be bullish or bearish. And it doesn't matter what it is. Bank of England, NASDAQ, crude oil, gold, whatever it is, you know, this is one way to do it. You know, just kind of see where the conversation is happening, what the overall sentiment is. Pay particular attention to how recent that news is. All right. Another thing you can do, and I think this is a very easy shortcut, is go to a curated news source. Okay. In this case, something like Forex Factory's news tab. This is forexfactory.com. Click on the news tab. You know, there's ways to shortcut the process. Find out what traders are talking about. Find out what traders are sharing with one another. This is a curated news source. And what you'll get is, you know, as you can see, MarketWatch, Bloomberg, you know, CNBC, you know, they're coming from so many sources, the Bank of England, and so it's curated. Some of them are bloggers, some of them are individual traders, some of them are news sources. But again, you get a feeling in this case for what traders are thinking about, talking about. And again, the sentiment. What are our biggest stories this morning? Well, if you're a currency trader, the Bank of England hiked. If you're looking at tariffs, you know, Wilbur Ross comes out, the Commerce Secretary says, well, it's not going to be cataclysmic. All right. Again, Carney, monetary policy, etc. All right. China. So this is what's happening on the currency side. Another thing you can do is head over to a site, and one of the members just reminded me of this site just a couple days ago. It's Financial Juice. Financial Juice. And it's a free site. I think you just register for it, and you can see what's going on in terms of, again, curation. But it's almost like a live blog / curation, right? So you can see what's been talked about across a number of topics. Again, you can choose what your topic would be. If you're a little bit more of an equities person, go check out thefly.com. I look at all of these, right? I'll check out the Fly. I'll check out the homepage, actually the markets page of the Wall Street Journal. I'll check out Financial Times. Right? This is just what I do, right? I'll just check out where the conversations are happening. Again and again and again. Now, this doesn't take a long time because notice I'm not saying I'm necessarily reading the articles. I'm looking at headlines. I'm looking at what themes keep coming up again and again. So this is where I want to just get a feel for the pulse of the market. You know, most market participants are what's known, and I wish I'd coined this term, but they're known as what's called a macro tourist. In other words, they're getting yanked around by whatever the big narrative is on any particular day. We don't want to get yanked around. We want to use that psychology. The way we used it today, there were two narratives. I mentioned this in the notes. In fact, the first couple of things we talked about in the chat room were, one, how do these two narratives play out, right? Yesterday we had a big jolt from the idea that we're going to ratchet up from 10 to 25% or 20% on the 200 billion from China. I don't care what the numbers are. I just know that it puts that fear narrative, injects it back into the market. But I also know there was this narrative about Apple. It can't save the market, but it's the only narrative out there that can go toe-to-toe with the tariffs. So it became a theme of tariffs versus 1 trillion. Well, I made a bet on 1 trillion. And how did we do that? Well, we were already long Apple going into earnings on Friday's pullback and then Monday. But another way to play Apple is to play the index or indices that it's most heavily weighted in, namely the NASDAQ and then the S&P. Earlier this morning, long before the bell rang, I guess it was about 8:30, 8:40 this morning, we ended up with what we call an intraday trend reversal. And that was a buy setup. You can see back in here. That was our buy right in this area. And we knew that there was the risk of taking this trade into the open. But again, that's the risk we are willing to take. It's pretty tricky to trade pre-open. I actually look at the pre-open, 4 a.m., 6 a.m. to 9, and then basically 8 to 9. The closer we get to the open, the more that psychology and the increased volatility is going to affect the market. But if the 1 trillion narrative was going to win, guess what the market was going to get hit by? Buy orders for Apple, which takes the NASDAQ and the S&P higher. And that is what we did today. That was our big trade for today. We've been long crude since the inventories. So that's been a great day too. Nothing like risk appetite to bring crude up. But this is when the themes come together, and I can't emphasize enough. There's no harm in passing on the shorts in this market, gang. I think the narrative is still very, very bullish. So I'd rather be on the sidelines on the down days and look for where the pullbacks are happening when we see where those those moves to the downside have taken us. And you'll notice, I'm going to show you the daily chart before we kind of end this very long recap video, but the two trends that are still very valid, Dow and S&P, right into the wave, right into the propulsion dots, and up they've gone. We've actually passed on the Dow, reason being, if the ugly narrative of tariffs was going to be what the market was going to key in, and I didn't want to be exposed to the Dow, right? So we went with the S&P and the NASDAQ, again, making a bet on Apple. That's how you understand the macro. That's how you don't be a tourist. That's how you take advantage of the psychology in the market on any given day. Today was just a really clear-cut example of that, and I had a really great time in the markets this morning in the chat room doing this with the crew. Nothing like a big trade and enjoying that as the market heads higher. I'll see you in the next update.